Stefan, you are so welcome to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm so delighted to have you as my guest today. We originally connected on the platform Clubhouse a number of months ago, the start of this year, and had some such interesting conversations. We've stayed in touch since then. I'm not really on Clubhouse anymore. You said that you're not really hanging out there anymore either. But I thought it'd be brilliant to have you on the podcast to discuss some of the things that we talked about, but also get your perspective on the key challenges of HR and how to create a happier work environment in a people first environment. Can you let listeners know a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, it was lovely to meet you on Clubhouse and, see where relationships and conversations go to. So I feel very, very honored to be on your podcast because I know you're very successful in this area. I'm Stefan Tonnon. I work in the HR area for the last probably 25 plus years now. So I won't say too much about it because otherwise people will guessing my age.
You give your age away.
Yeah. I've been working in the technology space for all my life. So I've come from technology companies. Most of the times I work for software companies. And the last 5 years I work at a technology company that is in between vendors and our end customers. And I've been in several roles. I've been in recruitment, I've been in HR, I've been in global roles. I've lived in all kinds of places in the world for my job, which is very, very good to have as a cultural background, understanding how people think and how things are different around the world is interesting. And there's no better way to experience that when you actually live in a different country.
Definitely.
Living in Sweden today, but I'm actually Dutch. So for my Dutch people that are going to watch this podcast, I will do this all in English. But I live in Sweden with my lovely wife, Yvonne. I really enjoy Sweden, although we're getting to the dark period now. So it's becoming winter.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm noticing the same in Ireland, the dark mornings, and it's definitely getting darker and darker in the evenings for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really rich background and similar to myself in the sense that I have lived in multiple places around the world and have, you get that perspective of the different cultural backgrounds and exactly as you said, how people think in different areas and how you might apply that. Now, I know for the purposes of today, it's kind of like I love having you on the podcast because it's very much from the HR practitioner perspective. And I would love to have more of these conversations on the podcast. I often speak with people who are consultants and they're going into organizations, but the beauty about having you here today is talking from the horse's mouth about how to create those happier working environments, what some of the key challenges might be, and what are some of the first steps. I know we spoke about kindness and things like that as well, so maybe let's kick off with what does that actually mean, whether it's happiness at work or a people first organization. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it means many things for many people, and that's a good thing and a bad thing, I think. I think that, and I've had these conversations before. So, where do you start as a company? And it's different for consultants because consultants, come from an area where they give advice to companies. But the biggest challenge that companies have is actually implementing it and then living that culture that you want to implement. And there's been a lot of discussions around culture and values. And for me personally, I look at the values of the company. I think that everything starts with the values of the company before you create a culture. And the reason that I say that is the values is the communication between people that have the same value system that will stay the same wherever you are. So whether you're in the US, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in the mainland Europe, Singapore, the value system stays the same. The culture is based on the values. But as you all know, and you have lived in different countries as well, a culture is defined by where you live, what the circumstances are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we see a lot of discussions around the culture of a company, but the culture is defined by the people that actually work in it. The values is something that keeps us together. And I think at Inside where I work today, that's our core strategy and our people strategy. Everything starts with our values, whether we do interviews, whether we talk to each other, whether we do projects, whether we do performance reviews, all those things are tied down by our values. And for us, it's very important that the values are not only posters on the wall, but they are actually living within everything that we do. So once we have a performance review, once we have a promotion panel, those values are always at the core of the questioning that we do with our teammates, with our leaders, with everybody else. And even our customers know our values, and that's how strong they are.
Yeah. You're definitely speaking my language now, Stefan. Like, that is, I am so into that. And I think if you had asked me a number of years ago what are values, I probably wouldn't have known my own core values, let's say, but I would have been aware of the company values of the places I worked, but equally aware that the values were spoken about, but they weren't the lived. And I love that you say it's the lived experience, and it's the first thing that you kind of talk about when it comes to performance. It's the first thing you think about when it comes to hiring new people. And can I ask, what are your values in the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about hunger, heart, and harmony. So three very simple words, but they have a very, very strong meaning for us within our company. And it always is something that you can translate differently, but the core of those three values are within ourselves. So it's the hunger to do well, it's the hunger to help people, to help our customers, to help our teammates. It's the heart, so our heart, so we're doing the right things for the right reasons. And it's our harmony that keeps us all together as a team. So that's where our diversity lives and all the things that we do for each other and for our communities around us. Now, people can translate that into different things, but that is the core that we live by. And I think that that is the most important thing. And those are the values that I have. I might translate them differently, but it's the things that I hold on to in the last 25 years that I've worked. And when I either apply or get asked for a new role, those values are very important to me. And I always say to people when they apply for other roles or other companies, don't always ask about the culture, because it depends on where the company is built. So if you're going to work for an international company and they started the company in San Francisco, there's a certain culture in San Francisco. So there's a certain culture where the CEO is going to talk to me. But when I did my interviews with Insight, and I didn't know Insight when I started here, I was headhunted into the company. What I found very, very interesting is that every conversation that I have, from the hiring manager all the way to the CEO, given that my seniority of my job, that values system came up every single time. And that was a confirmation for me that I wanted to work for this company. So it turned around from, amazing opportunity to now wanting to work for that company because it represents the same values that I have. And the culture is different. I mean, we have a different culture in the US than we have in Europe or that we have in APJ, but those value systems are exactly the same. So when I pick up the phone and talk to my CEO, I know that he's has the same values as myself, and it makes the conversation so much easier.
Okay, yeah. No, that's brilliant. In terms of the kind of practical, excuse me, in terms of the practical elements around hunger, heart, and harmony, do you have like kind of written guidelines as to what it means and what it doesn't mean? Is there kind of that clarity, or is it up a bit more for interpretation?
Yeah, I would always say go to insight.com where our company lives and our values are there. So it shows you what we do and why we're doing it. And that is important. If you see all the communication that our teammates do on LinkedIn and other social channels, you most of the time see hunger, heart, and harmony go through that organization as well. So you can see that people are actually proud that they live those same values as well. And I think that that's where it starts. One thing that we do as a company is continuously to listen, and not listening to respond to people, but actually listen to what they can contribute to do this. So if you take a look at what we do from our diversity, inclusivity, and belonging agenda in our company, that is, although it's supported by leadership, of course, because otherwise there's no point in starting it, but it's driven by our teammates themselves. And I think that that is really important. You need to make them part of what you're trying to achieve as a company, and listen to your teammates to make sure you make the right decisions. So this is not top-down driven, but it is top sponsored, I would say. Executive sponsorship is very, very important because, if our CEO doesn't believe in diversity, then, what's the point? I mean, then as a company, you can try to do that, but leadership needs to adopt that as well.
So, I mean, there's loads there to talk about. It's about listening not just to what they're saying, but how they can contribute and how they can empower themselves to create the kind of organization they want to work in, especially when it comes to diversity, inclusion, belonging, how they can be empowered to make their own decisions. And it's not about implementation from the top. It's more about implementation, but sponsorship from the top, but implementation then by the teammates. So they're very much involved in it.
Yeah, we see all the of course I'm an executive sponsor in my role, but also because I've been fighting for diversity for the last 10 years, and I'm a white male, middle-aged, very privileged.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to put myself out there to fight for all the things that I'm fighting for from a
Yeah.
diversity perspective.
Yeah.
If you look at inside, and I talk about my region in EMEA right now, most of the initiatives come from our teammates themselves. And
Okay.
what we then do as an executive team is just help to formalize it a little bit more, help them to give them tools to actually do things around this.
Yeah.
Most of the initiatives come from our teammates themselves, and that is the only way that it will work. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't work if I tell them exactly what needs to happen.
Yeah.
We're all part of a team. We're all the teammates. I'm Stefan. I happen to have a title, but please have those conversations together. And then, most of the things that I say is listen with your heart so you can understand what somebody says before you respond, because
Yeah.
listening is one of the key things as leaders to do. But most leaders just listen and then respond rather
Yeah.
than absorbing the messages, really thinking about what somebody tries to say, and then respond to the questions
Yeah.
that it's have.
Yeah. Listen to understand rather than to
Respond.
respond. Yeah. So on this idea then of diversity, what kind of initiatives have the team come up with?
One of the things that I spoke to you about a couple of diversity panels that I was on is that our allyship, our inside allyship, comes from our
Okay.
teammates themselves. There was a conversation between a couple of teammates and our marketing director at the time about how can we stand up for the things that we really believe in. And
Yeah.
allyships have been around in other companies in other forms as well. But we didn't say, well, we're going to do diversity and these are the things that we're going to focus on. No, this came from our teammates ourselves. And then there will be executive sponsorship to help them to, build that project out to where it is today. And today we have strong allies that stand up for diversity. So they are able to represent a group of people or represent our company and speak out when something is not going well. I mean,
Yeah.
we need to be honest here. Diversity is on the top of the agenda for everybody, but it
Yeah.
could be something that we just do because it needs to be done, or it is something that we do because we really believe in it. And
Yeah.
we really believe in it as a company that is a beneficial for all of our teammates. We believe that everybody can make a difference within our company, no matter where they come from, what culture, where they grew up, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah.
We think that they actually need to have a voice, and I'm very so proud that teammates stand up if they see something within a company that is not completely right, that they can speak
Yeah.
out and challenge it. And I think that that is the most important thing.
Yeah.
If you talk about diversity, you also should challenge yourselves and ourselves if things are not as bright as they look like. And we're just on the beginning of the journey, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, what does that look like? What is the impact of creating that kind of culture or creating that executive sponsorship? You know, and I don't mean for this to be like a just looking at the numbers exercise, but what are the kind of tangible benefits, I suppose, that you've seen from creating this, from having that culture of we promote diversity?
Yeah, and I talk a lot of belongings. So people feel that they belong to a company, and they feel that they are being heard, and they feel that they can make a difference no matter what background they have or what culture they grew up. And I think that that is important. So they don't feel left alone or feel separated out. And I think that that is important. So if my team, we want to develop our teammates to get better and better and educate themselves and become their better selves at the company, and we give them all kinds of tools, there should not be anything that is limiting their possibilities within the company. So I think that once you work at my company at Insight right now, it doesn't matter where you come from or how you look or all kinds of criteria that you might want to have. We want to get the best out of those people for themselves and for the company ultimately. And I think that that is important. And if you then don't make sure that they are having a voice and they are part of what we're trying to achieve, then it will never be successful. And most of the times, in some of the panels that I talk about diversity, I talk about humans. I don't talk about men, female, or black or
Yeah, yeah.
white, those kind of differentiations. I mean, we're all humans, no matter where we come from, and
Yeah,
we all
yeah.
want the best for our humans. But that's how I lived the last 25 years, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. And it's still an uphill battle, to be fair. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not easy as just saying all those nice kind of things. There's still
exactly.
that don't work that well, and there's still things that slip into the conversations that should not be part of the conversations.
Yeah, it's a journey and it's a learning experience, I think, as time goes on.
Exactly.
Um, I'm intrigued by this idea of belonging. It's one of the pillars in my business under Happier at Work. Belonging is one of the pillars that I am so keen to support. And there's a few different areas, I suppose, that from my perspective touch into that sense of belonging. And I suppose, what do you see as the relationship between the values piece and the belonging piece, and the diversity piece and the belonging piece?
Yeah, most of the times when I talk about diversity, I never forget belonging, because that's key to whether you work for a company or not. So if we talked about the values in the beginning, those are important to me, because that me as a person, my values need to be aligned with the company.
Yeah,
You cannot expect to be a full alignment, right? Because it's still a business, but most of the values that I have are inside as well.
yeah,
But then there's a piece of me that wants to be belonging in a company. So
yeah,
why am I there, and do I really belong in that company, or am I just a teammate to produce revenue for them?
yeah,
So the values can be right, but I don't feel that I belong, then I will never be the one that produces the things that the company wants me to produce, or give me the feeling that I'm going to add value to the company. And those things are very much important from a belonging perspective. So yes, there needs to be diversity. Yes, you want to have a diverse workforce. You want to represent, the communities that you work in.
yeah,
But if you don't belong in the company, or you don't feel that you belong in the company, then that is a major problem for yourself, because then you go to work because you really see it as work, and it's a 9 to 5, and you cannot wait until the clock says 5 because you can run home.
yeah.
Though that sounds a little bit
I've
great,
been there.
pandemic now, but you close down your laptop at 5 o'clock,
Yeah,
and you want to do that.
yeah,
If you belong, and we see that certainly in we have value awards in our company, so we reward people if they go above and beyond what they normally need to do for themselves. If you truly belong, you are willing to go the extra mile to do well for your teammates, or to do well for the customer, or to do well for the company. There's a more effort that you want to do, because you feel that you're doing the right thing and you're part of that adventure.
yeah. And what do you think then? Like, I have my own ideas. I'll share my ideas in a minute. But what do you think drives that sense of belonging in an organization? If it's not just the values, it's kind of like I jotted down there. It's kind of values plus. Like, what is that plus piece?
Well, I think it's, and I will bring that to me personally. I feel if I belong to a company, if I have a people-centric leader around me, so
Okay, yeah,
somebody around me fosters a culture where everybody feels valued, then of course I feel that I belong in that company.
hmm.
So, if you go back to, if you apply for a job, and you're going to check values, check. Culture, yeah, that probably fits well to me. But if you have a leader that doesn't fit you well, and doesn't give you that feeling of belonging,
Yeah,
then all the good things that they have might fall away. And the pandemic has proven that we as leaders had to change our behaviors a little bit, because we used to have people in the office, or in the bigger offices, you can see your team sitting there and you can manage them in a different way. When everybody works from home, it's a completely different situation. And now suddenly people, leaders, need to be much more human, and humanizing themselves, and ask different questions to their teammates to really understand how they are feeling. So the whole perception of leadership changed a little bit.
hmm.
Leadership in itself is still the same, but the humanization of leadership and being people centric has certainly exposed itself over the last 15 months.
Do you think, and I've heard this from a couple of different places, but do you think the pandemic in some ways has exposed leaders who are exceptionally good as well as exceptionally bad? So, be they leaders who are more people centric and show a lot of empathy, versus leaders who haven't maybe don't have that skill naturally.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would classify him as good as bad, good or
Okay.
bad. I think it showed leaders that are agile enough to adapt their leadership
Okay.
style to a new situation. I think that that is important anyway as a leader. As a leader, you are thrown into new situations every couple of years because the social environment is changing, our customers are changing, the direction of the company is changing. So, how agile are you as a leader to actually change your leadership style towards the company that you work for or the team that you work for? And of
Yeah.
course, we had leaders that were old school, that had that team in front of them, and that works best for them. So they
Yeah.
didn't have to, they almost give you marching orders, which in some cases works very, very well. But once the team is not in front of you anymore, it requires different skills because
Yeah.
we're now doing the same. we're looking at a screen and talking to a screen to each other
Yeah.
while we're sitting at a bar and we have the same conversation. The conversation is a little bit different because we can see each other. There's different flavors of communication that we're missing today that are there when you see somebody face to face. So as a leader, you need to adapt pretty quickly on how am I going to adapt my leadership style to still get
Yeah.
this engagement, get the same performance, and get the same things out of the people that you lead.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of touch back on this idea of belonging and, share some of my own thoughts around that as well. So I suppose for me, the belonging piece is the values is really important. And when it comes to the diversity piece, it's, sorry, don't know what's going on, frog in my throat this morning. The belonging piece then is, yeah, so it's the values, but it's the, I think it's really important to highlight it's bringing the diversity of thought into that as well. So it's not about hiring people who are clones of each other. It's bringing in that diverse thinking, people who think in different ways than I might think myself. So that it's kind of this culture of challenge as well.
Yeah, and belonging is, and luckily it becomes much more of the diversity agenda, which is great.
Yeah.
But even if we go back into our childhood, as a young boy or a young girl, you want to belong somewhere.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean
I
that
think it's part of being human. It's
yeah,
a
that
natural
exists in
tendency
our
that we have.
exactly it exists in our human nature, right?
Mm.
To belong or not to belong is very subjective experience that can be influenced by so many different factors. But
Mm.
want to belong to a tribe, or you want to belong to a friend group, or you want to belong in a football club if you play the sports. That belonging is, we're social animals. If we don't belong somewhere, we exclude ourselves from so many things, and then we become a different human being.
Yeah.
And we are not, human beings are not built like that.
And the other thought I had when we were talking about this idea of belonging and having a people-centric leader was this idea of a psychologically safe environment or building a culture of trust where if someone shows up to work they're free to completely be themselves, that they can challenge things, that they can freely share their ideas and drive innovation that way. Any thoughts around building a psychologically safe environment to foster
Yeah,
belonging specifically?
yeah. Trust is where most things start. If there's no trust, people cannot really speak up for themselves, and
Yeah.
therefore, don't really give you the real feedback that you want to hear to actually make a place a better place to work. We've been working hard to make this a fantastic place to work for all people.
Yeah.
And although I believe that we have very strong values and a very strong culture, a couple of years ago we decided to just test that with the Great Place to Work. So just
Mm.
have an external person or an external organization to validate if we're actually doing the right things. Now,
Yeah.
I know it's sort of a competition, and of course you want to score high.
Yeah.
But for me personally and my team, it was more to look at, okay, so all the things that we initiate within our company, how does that actually work from an outside perspective? Because we,
Yeah.
we are a company that does a lot of things internally. We want to make sure that
Mm.
everybody feels that they can do the things and make a difference within our company. But how does that actually tie up to if we compare ourselves with others? And luckily, that went very well for us. We are very, very highly rated from a great company perspective from the UK, from Austria and Italy, where we went live with that. And this year became the best place to work in Europe, which was important for us to understand that everything that we do, if we compare ourselves with others or compare ourselves to standards that a great place to work has, to see that actually what we're doing is along the lines that makes you a great place to work.
Yeah.
Happiness and kindness and all those kind of things, are part of that whole culture. But sometimes it's important not to necessarily get best in class, but you want to sometimes just make sure that all the things that you do right, are they right if we look at the outside world? Because then you can also bring it back as a company and as HR. If I recruit people, all the things that I'm doing, do they actually fit in the outside world, right? Because what arguably what we're not good at as a company is all those good things that we do internally represent that to the outside world. So once we talk to candidates, letting them know what we do from a value perspective, culture perspective, from a diversity perspective, from a sustainability perspective, all those good initiatives, they don't necessarily know that right from the get-go.
Okay.
So the Great Place to Work helps us a little bit to show, we're doing all those things and we think that we're doing the right things, and therefore our candidate market and our pool is going to be bigger because actually people want to work here rather than the other way around.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense. And I was going to come back to this idea of like the practical application. So you did mention earlier incorporating the values into the hiring process, into the performance reviews. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because again, it comes back to where we started, right? Is it posters on the wall, or actually are you doing something with that?
Yeah.
So yeah, first of all, I told my personal story. You go through the ranks to do your own interview. You end up with the CEO, and I could feel they all talked about the values. So that was a check in the box, and a very important check in the box for me to change employer at that moment in time. And that is still in the whole recruitment process. If we think about a promotion board that we have, so if you want to be promoted from a manager to a director, you come in front of a panel, so you need to represent yourself and why you want the job and all those kind of good things. The value part is probably around 30 to 40% of that decision.
Okay.
So do we feel that this leader is going to represent our values in a way that we think that our values need to be represented? Because it all starts with leadership. If you have a terrible leader, then the values just fall apart. So that's very, very important to us. Performance reviews, we used to do them once a year, but we changed that 3 years ago. So we do them quarterly. We call them connection meetings. That's where values play a role as well. So we constantly check, so what are your goals? What are your values? Where do you need to go? What do you need? And all that kind of good stuff. And one thing that we do differently than other companies, we have a sales-driven culture, of course, because we still need to make sure that we survive as a business.
Yeah.
And we have a President's Club, or Summit Club, as we call it now. At most companies, that is a club where our sales performers go to. Now, with us, that is still true. However, we also have a category of value winners, as we call them, that can go to the President's Club, which means that teammates amongst themselves can nominate people for a value award if they go above and beyond the normal things that they do. It could be for a customer, but most of the times I've seen that do go beyond and above for things they do for other teammates that we have in the business, or help with a process, or work a little bit longer to help somebody on the other side of the world. And those get into a pool, and then they get chosen and they go to Summit Club as well. And that shows, for me personally at least, that this is not a poster on the wall. This is actually living throughout our company. But don't forget, because it sounds fantastic, but this is a process over the last 10 years. We have a CEO that started this process when he started probably 10 or 11 years ago. He's going to retire at the end of the year, but he ingrained that into our company and into our processes, and that was very important to him. And that's how we built the foundation of the company, what it is today. But don't make the mistake as an HR professional that you can do this within a year. That doesn't work. There's a lot of hard work that you need to do over a number of years, and then continue to reinvent yourself, continue to have new ideas on reinforcing our values and reinforcing the right things that we want to do for our teammates. And it's a journey. There's no end state here.
I'm so glad that you said that it's not kind of a quick fix. It is a journey and it's a process, and you're 10 years into this and it's probably still a journey as well. And I do have a couple of questions on the back of that. And I suppose one of them is because you mentioned that leadership, it all starts with leadership, and you need to have a leader who embodies the values. So one of the questions centers around that, and then the other is more from a individual or a personal perspective. So the first one really is, what if an organization has a leader that they where they're not currently really embodying the values, that they've been promoted because they've performed well, that they've got in good sales, but they're not necessarily great at people. So that's the first part of the question. And the second one is more around an individual. And if an individual is currently in an organization where they don't feel their values align, and any thoughts around the conflict that might arise or what they could do in that situation.
Yeah, and bad news conversations are the worst conversations to have, and it's the most difficult conversation that you need to have. And it's almost, for us in our company, the values are incredibly important and probably arguably the most important thing that we have in our company. So if we have a leader that doesn't live our values, then there will be conversations. And in the worst case, there will be conversations that they need to exit the company, no matter how good their results might be, or no matter how good their individual performance might be. If you allow that to be in your company, then that will cause a problem longer term. Because it creates a toxic environment, and it creates something that we don't believe in. And then if we talk about the piece of belonging, if you work for that individual, if it might be a leader, then you don't feel that you belong to the company, because you hear somebody else saying about our values and how our culture works, and then you personally as an individual work for a leader that doesn't live those values. That is a major problem. And again, if you only have posters on the wall, companies will allow that to happen. Now, I need to admit that is the most difficult thing to do, right? Because if you have, let's say you have an individual contributor that is doing fantastically well, overperforms every single year, but is not living the values, letting go of that individual based on the values is a tough thing to do. But we have to make that decision, because otherwise it will affect other teammates around that individual. So no matter how good and how performing well that is, if the values are not lived by, and we see things happening that should not happen within this company, then you need to have those conversations with that individual. And there's then a choice for that individual to change themselves or not. And if that doesn't change, then then it's our belief that we should not have people around doing things that we don't believe in.
Yeah.
That is very tough. That's the hardest part that you need to do as a company, to make sure that your values are true and honest and are there. And if you have a company where we have that trust environment and that safe environment for people to speak up, then I'm still hopeful that teammates will come to me or any of my HR colleagues and say, I have that individual next to me that just does things that are so contradictory to our values. Can we please have that conversation? Because that's where the individual contributor will stand up and say, wait a minute, we all are that lock on the door. We all, guard our values. We have people that don't live our values. Then we expect our teammates to, step up and say something about it, so we can correct it. And that's where the trust piece and the safe environment comes in. Now, it's a hard part. So, it sounds very easy out of my mouth, but we all know that is not easy to do. But we have leaders that really focus in on that very, very heavily. My team is trained to look at that very, very heavily as well. And we might, if you go into recruitment, make it a little bit more difficult. If you go into recruitment, you might have the best candidate in the world, but if we feel that the value system is not there, we will not hire.
Yeah.
No matter how much we would like to have those skills, but if the values are not there, then it's that feeling of belonging for the teammates around that person will not going to work. So you need to make some tough decisions as a company. That is not easy.
Yeah. No, it echoes everything that I understand to be true, and the research that I did as part of my dissertation around, like, you can teach people new skills, you can teach people to do things differently, but you can't teach people to have new values. Like your values are inherent to you as a person. And so you want to find people and surround people who will have that sense of belonging with each other, because exactly as you said at the start, you speak the same language and you're coming from that same kind of value system.
Yeah, exactly. And you see companies that have strong value systems and cultures from the beginning of the pandemic. The transformation into the pandemic, into a whole new situation, was easier for those companies because they all, helped each other to get, through this together. And that is so important. And companies that didn't have that strong value system or the strong culture were struggling.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't get the team together anymore. They struggled to get everybody aligned and doing the right things. And I've seen companies that have that strong value system, including ourselves, where despite it being a very difficult situation, people found each other, helped each other. They did shopping for each other. They did all the right things that you expect a human being to do.
Yeah.
And that was representative of how we treat our customers, how we treat our teammates, how we treat ourselves. And I think that is so important. So, like from your research as well, when things go really, really bad, the value systems keeps everything together and keeps the companies together, and we lift each other up. That's what you want to do in real life. That's what you want to do in a company. That's what you want to do as a human being.
Yeah.
But that requires to have the same sort of individuals together.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. Stefan, is there anything else that you would like to share today? Is there anything else that we didn't cover, that we didn't touch on, that you feel would benefit people from a practical perspective when it comes to creating those happier working environments?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've noticed over the last couple of years is that if you want to create an environment of belonging, and I'm talking about HR professionals now, but also about teammates and individuals. If you want to be understanding and want to make sure that that kindness matters, as I always talk about on the Friday on LinkedIn, then it's important to be a world citizen. And what I mean by that is that we know that there's differences between countries. We live in Europe, but we also know that there's big differences between the different regions in the world. And instead of criticizing each other for the culture that they might have, being open-minded and being a world citizen, and I'm trying to understand what the other person is actually trying to do. I think too many times, especially in international companies, and I work for a company that is over 11,000 people, and most of the people live and work in the UK, in the US. We most of the time have, the US is inventing something that is good for the global company, and then they drop it over and give it to Europe and give it to Asia Pac, and then you need to make sense of it and try to make it work here. And it doesn't always work, because we all have our unconscious bias. We all have, where we live and how we work. We think that we have the right solution, but it's not always a global solution. And making sure that you as a global citizen understand what they're trying to do and then translate it into something that will work for your region is so important, rather than just discouraged to do it at all. And I think that one of the leadership skills and one of the individual skills that we all need to have is be much more of a global citizen, because the world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
We need to celebrate our differences rather than just, avoid to talk to somebody else.
Yeah. And do you have any specific examples of an initiative that came out of the US that didn't translate well, let's say, to Europe or to one of the other regions?
Well, there's many examples, but sometimes when you need to change a system and your decision makers are in the US and they think they make the right decision, then try to get us on board from a European or Asia Pac perspective is difficult. And the example is that if I was a US citizen, taking the US as an example, and I need to implement an HR program, I'll take that from my perspective. And the US is incredibly big, 350 million people. They all speak one language. They have different states, but they all speak one language. So they don't have the challenges that we have in Europe, like with different currencies, different languages, all those different cultures, different labor laws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So our world is a little bit more complex when you run different countries. But if you're a US leader and you've never really experienced that, then you would take the best system from your perspective, what is best for you. And then when you want to roll it out globally, then that's where the problem starts. So, and I speak to many of the HR leaders. We've all been in the situations where you work for a US company and the decision makers are in the US, that they need to embrace all the challenges that you have in Europe. Yeah. Now, luckily, there's many examples the other way around as well. So don't get me wrong. But if you are, again, a global citizen, you approach it from, okay, what is best from a global perspective? So what needs to be the prerequisites to actually implement a system or a process or a policy? And how does it work everywhere? Yeah. And that is something that is a skill that's going to be very, very important over the next 10 years. Understanding how all those pieces of the puzzle work together.
That's a really, really good point. And having worked in large multinationals with headquarters in the US, I can totally relate to that, where there's initiatives that come. This isn't even from a HR perspective, it's more from a management perspective, from a structural perspective, initiatives that have come from the US that don't really apply, even from an engagement perspective. It's something that we couldn't relate to, certainly in Europe.
Stefan, I worked for other companies as well where the other way it works exactly the same. Okay, where a European founded company is expanding in the US and thinks that everything that we do in Europe we're just going to copy paste in the US. That doesn't work. And that's why it all comes back being the global citizen, trying to understand how countries or regions work is so important. You see it in very small scale here in Europe. I mean, if I want to do something with hybrid working, then we need to consider all the different countries and the different laws and different things that we need to do. I cannot just build one policy for all. That doesn't work.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure the states might be similar in that there's different states that might govern those kind of rules as well, and there's different taxation laws within, all of those complications as well. Stefan, the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast: what makes you happier at work?
Good question. I think what makes me happy is that I can add value to teammates and help them bring the best out of themselves, no matter what kind of background or culture. And together with my team, I can help develop them and grow them. I'm that kind of person that, gets incredibly proud if somebody within my team gets promoted or builds a new career somewhere else, that I can be part of that little bit of getting somebody thinking outside of the box is very, very important to me. And that's what I've been trying to do over the last 25 years. It's not about me. It's about making your team the best team out there, making your company the best company out there.
Yeah.
And that's probably the mission that I have in my role. And HR is a fantastic place to be because you're the spider in the web. So you see everything that goes around you and you try to influence people in the right way.
Yeah.
But particularly the last probably 15 years, it's been great that we have more tools and more ability and capabilities to help people develop themselves, because we all know that what you learn in school and what actually happens in a company are two different things.
Yeah.
Helping people on that journey and they could be in the same role for 10 years, but still helping them develop as a human being is so important to me. And when I see those successes, that makes me the most proud, and I get the most happiness out of that when we celebrate success of somebody else.
Yeah. And like, that's, for me, that epitomizes what a leader is seeing the success through other people. So their own success comes through helping other people to succeed in whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah, and within our company, we do a lot of training, and we have our leadership philosophy. So we tell people what our philosophy is, how we approach leadership. And the number one thing that I have in my leadership philosophy, and they're different for everybody, but for me, it's empowerment. That's when I started working at Inside, that's the first thing that I told my team. And it took them probably around 6 to 8 months to understand what that actually meant. Because we're used to get orders from above and they do the things that they do, and they did them fantastically well. But giving them empowerment to make decisions for themselves that are right for the company just changed the whole team into a very proactive organization.
Yeah.
And leaders around me go directly to those subject matter experts to get the advice that they want. They don't have to do that through me. So
Yeah.
they explored things and are different human beings today than they were 5 years ago. And that, if something makes me happy, then that's, the most things that I'm proud of. If I talk to
Yeah.
somebody's birthday party, I talk rather than talking about myself, I talk about the journey that my team goes
Yeah.
through,
Yeah.
and continues to go through, hopefully.
That's such a nice story. And I just wanted to kind of pick up on this idea of empowerment, and can you share the leadership philosophy from, say, a different perspective from a different leader within the organization and what that might look like?
Yeah, so in the last year and a half, we have a new president for EMEA, for instance, and her number one is team. And it's
Okay.
very, very profound on her leadership philosophy. She discusses that every time she goes around when she's able to travel.
Yeah.
But it is something that is very close to her heart. That's what
Yeah.
she fights for every single day. And the good thing is that the leadership philosophy tells you something about that person.
Mm.
So it is something that represents them. And you can see that in everything that they do. So all hands that we have or presentations to the board, the people subject is always number one. It's not first the business and then people. No, it's always first the people. And that's,
Yeah.
leadership philosophy therefore represents how people really behave. So it's an expectation that you set to your teams that this is the person I am, this is what I'm trying to do. And for me, that has always been, I'm already a people leader because I'm in HR, so that's kind of what you do. But for me, it's empowerment. And if you talk to anybody in my team, they know that they can, they can come up with new ideas. They can think about things that they want to do in the next 2 years. They can think about taking decisions because they know it's the right decisions.
Mm.
They only come to me when it's really, financial decision where they need support, or they have something that we're going off tracks a little bit. And is that the
Yeah.
right thing to do right now? So there's still debates, but it keeps them open-minded and helps them to grow themselves to something that they didn't think 5 years ago, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. 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 That's brilliant. I love that story. And Stefan, if people want to know more about you, if they want to connect with you, find out more, what's the best way that they can do that?
As you know, I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's the best way to reach me. So if you're curious about me, just read my profile. If you want to reach out, I tend to respond quite quickly on LinkedIn to people's questions. I'm doing some mentoring for people via LinkedIn as well. So the best way to reach me is up there. And I would say that if you want to discuss those kind of things with me, I'm happy to have those conversations. I also have a very busy job, so I don't always have time to do things. So some delay in responding. But yeah, no, I try to share my knowledge the best way that I can, because I think it's important that we talk about, not only our successes, but also the things that didn't went so well and how did we respond to that.
Yeah.
Because, we like to talk about our successes, but it's just struggle to do the right thing for a company and grow your company and doing all the right things and pleasing everybody. And when we were in the middle of the pandemics, I always say, everybody's in the same storm, but everybody is on a different boat, which means that
Yeah.
every individual has his own small problems or big problems that we're not aware of. That's why one solution doesn't fit all. And I think that that's what people need to keep in the back of their minds when they talk to people or trying to build a solution for them. Be curious, ask the questions first before you come up with a solution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Stay curious. Really like that approach. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I've got loads and loads of notes and looking forward to reviewing those. And I really hope that listeners took a lot from the conversation as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.